The accounting world's most famous statement is that accountants and auditors are watchdogs and not bloodhounds because there are limited scope for accountants and auditors, and but we see that financial crimes do happen, frauds do happen, and auditors are not always able to figure those things out. So we do need bloodhounds to sniff clues and to go and figure out where the financial frauds happen, who did it, and how it was done. This is done by forensic accountants. Forensic accounting is a relatively new field of accounting where forensics and accounting merge into one. So today we are talking about how to uncover frauds with forensic accounting, and we have today an expert forensic accountant from India. He is Dr. Durgesh Pandey. Let's welcome Dr. Pandey in our podcast. Dr. Pandey, thank you very much for joining me today. Welcome to the Offshore Accountant Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, Sushil, for inviting me. Thank you for having me.
Sure. So let's begin with who you are. I introduced you as an expert in forensic accounting, but I want you to talk about yourself, what you do, and who you are.
So, as you have already introduced my name is Durgesh Pandey. I am based out of India, a western city in India called as Ahmedabad. It's in Gujarat state. And by qualification, I am an Indian chartered accountant. So CPAs, equivalent to CPAs in most Western countries in a lot of jurisdiction. I am an Indian chartered accountant. And I have done my PhD in financial crime investigation. I've done my PhD from the Institute of National Importance called as National Forensic Sciences University here in Gujarat. I have done my PhD in financial crime, and very recently I finished my law. I did my bachelor's in law because most of my work involved criminal investigation. So I completed law. That is on the academic front, a lot of certifications and all things which are not very significant. And I practice in the domain of crime investigation since say past 10 years probably. Yes, now 8 to 10 years I am practicing that. Past 7-8 years I'm exclusively doing this. I have investigated some very large frauds of the to the tune of say $2 billion and affecting 2 million depositors. I've investigated some frauds. We have been appointed by a lot of law enforcement agencies. I'm talking about the firm. I head a firm called as DKMS and Associates. So we have been appointed in almost 200 cases on the prosecution side to discover evidence, to prosecute, to assist prosecutors, to assist investigating officers. We also do a private investigation. Teaching and training are also a passion for me. So I teach a lot, I train a lot. I was an honorary professor in the university where I pursued my PhD. Yeah, I attend international conferences, publish international papers, and entire ecosystem. My entire world is in and around fraud detection, fraud prevention, learning about fraud, teaching about fraud. That is my universe.
All right. So we talk about fraud and forensic accounting. Most of us understand what accounting is, and most of us are accountants. But forensic accounting, we hear forensic when we talk about crimes, when we talk about murders and such type of things. But when forensic and accounting are in one place, what does that mean, forensic accounting? What does that word or that phrase mean?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. And then now that there is a little bit of, how do I say, awareness and learning amongst people regarding the forensic accounting. But then when I started, this was a big challenge. So forensic is associated mostly with crime. But the meaning of the word forensic, the dictionary Latin meaning of the word forensic is acceptable before a forum. So the idea in forensic accounting is to discover evidences or to gather evidences, as the words used in the standards are. To gather evidences, discover evidences, and help a court or help a jury to take decision. That knowledge of investigation through use of science, when combined with accounting, becomes forensic accounting, and it is mostly for fraud prevention, fraud detection, and all types of financial crime which involve money, money laundering, money trail. All these things are covered in forensic accounting. So this is the simplified version of forensic accounting.
Right. So when we talk about forensics or forensic accounting or investigations, what we talk about is after the fact, right? Whenever some financial crimes happen, then we go and investigate. But you also talked about prevention. So how does forensic accounting help in prevention of financial frauds?
So the practice. So for those who are practicing or for those who are aspiring to work in the forensic accounting domain, fraud prevention, fraud detection domain, and who are watching your channel in this podcast,
Right.
for them, I would say that the forensic practice is bifurcated into two parts. I've spoken at multiple forums. There may be videos as well. The forensic practice is bifurcated into two parts. So one is fraud detection, which is more glamorous and which is the perception of general people that there will be a large fraud and then there'll be somebody who will be coming, he'll be investigating. That is one part. And then fraud prevention is also a part. So the ACFE, it recommends biannual health checkup of an organization. So what happens in fraud prevention? There's something called as fraud risk assessment. That is the vulnerability of an organization to to be prone to vulnerability of the organization towards fraud. So that vulnerability should be assessed once in every 2 years, which is called as fraud risk assessment. It's an extension of internal audit, because I understand, as you said, our audience primarily consists of accountants. So I hope they understand what is internal audit, and it is an extension of internal audit where we check the propensity of fraud of the organization. So that is fraud prevention.
Right.
So that fraud prevention also covers, and it is also covered in the forensic accounting domain.
Right.
That is also covered.
Right. So, in the two bifurcation you mentioned, there's an ongoing process of fraud prevention, how fraud might happen, and if there is risk involved there. So, identify the risk that fraud might happen and maybe close that gap. And then the other one is if it happens, then to figure out where, how, and who did it. Right? So, you are an academic and also a practitioner of forensic accounting, but you might have that one incident in your mind where it piqued your interest about this whole subject, right? What was the case that piqued your interest on financial fraud and how it could be prevented, and to study about this new domain?
So, Sushil, frankly, it I didn't start with a plan that I will be pursuing my career in this forensic accounting domain. So I became a chartered accountant, and then I started practicing the conventional tax assurance practice. I started with that. I did for a couple of years, but then I found that the value addition which a firm of our size could do was very less.
Right.
So we were under the shackles of law. Besides first generation practitioners starting the career, it was very difficult to land up
Mhm.
serious clients, big clients.
Right.
So it was very difficult. Again, I practice in a city which has, probably at this point of time, we must be having around 50, 60, 70 odd firms which are third generation.
Right.
So surviving amongst them, it is like trying to swim in a pool of sharks.
Right.
So what I did, I wanted to create interest in something which is not being done frequently, which is new domain. So then I stumbled upon ACFE, and then I started reading about fraud examiners. Then I started reading about forensic accounting, how to do that. And slowly and steadily, it piqued my interest. At the same time, I was filing return for a professor.
Right.
We had the largest university in my state, Gujarat, as I say, the largest university was dean of one particular department. And I used to file his return. And then he inspired me that why don't you pursue PhD? I said, sir, I really don't have that time. I'm busy and I'm not willing also. He said, no, 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 you should pursue PhD. You are having something different thought process. Why don't you pursue PhD? So that is how he pushed me towards academic. Now, when I went to academics to pursue my PhD, I needed data. I needed data. That data was required for my thesis. So in the quest for data, in fight for data, I started visiting police department. I started meeting police officers, senior officers to collect data.
Mhm.
In this meeting, I found a very senior officer in state who helped me to get the data. And while getting the data, I found a gap between the skills that I have and the requirement of the police department, because they had a lot of cases of financial crime, but they couldn't understand how to solve that because they were not specialized. It was not commensurate with their knowledge and skills. So that is where I found gap. I started working with them, helping them for few years. Slowly and steadily, I was recognized, and then I got the first case. I do remember I was traveling. I was traveling to a close city nearby
Right.
for some sort of session, and I got a call from the special director, and he told that we have a huge case
Right.
where hundreds of crore. I mean, hundreds of crore is almost what 10 million is a crore.
Right.
So we have, yeah. So hundreds of million of Indian rupees was siphoned, stolen, and we required your assistance. That was my first case which I landed, and that transformed my entire career.
Right.
God willing, there was no looking back after that. And then, because of fraudster, we are in business.
Right.
We keep on getting something or the other every day. That is how, which transformed my career from a conventional accountant to a forensic accountant. That is how I shifted myself from.
So your move into forensic accounting was when you were searching for a competitive advantage or a better value addition that you could do from the other firms that were in the industry. And like you said, that frauds have been happening nowadays quite daily, and with technology and everything, it's been more easier for people to do frauds. But what is that word fraud? What does that mean? What is fraud actually?
Yeah, so under the Indian acts also, fraud is not defined in the under the Indian Criminal Act, the IPC, as we have Indian Penal Code. That is a British legacy.
Right.
Indian Penal Code. Now that we have those have been replaced by the new Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, Bharatiya Nagrik Suraksha Sanhita, Bharatiya Sakshya Adhiniyam. So we have the new act, but under the old acts, the frauds are not defined. But in a simple, for a layman and in simple terms, if we talk about fraud, fraud is nothing but somebody doing a deliberate wrong. So while mistake is something where someone does the wrong, not intentionally,
Right.
not with intent. Fraud is something which someone does intentionally deceiving, intentionally doing something wrong, intentionally trying to enrich himself or herself, and intentionally trying the other person to be deprived of what legitimately is his or hers.
Right.
That is the layman's definition of fraud, and that is our core. We have to investigate the fraud and we have to prevent the frauds. That is the most simplified version of fraud. We have a lot of definitions under a lot of acts,
Right.
but this is the most simplified version of fraud.
Right. And why is someone, motivated to do fraud? Why does fraud happen?
I mean, there are theories and theories as to why fraud happen. But then the simplest, and if you ask, the first thing that comes to my mind is the human desire of greed. Greed is something which forces everyone to do fraud. So we do have some academic theories as to why fraud happen, how to investigate. There's a very popular theory called as the fraud triangle. Fraud triangle given by Donald Tracy, which says that a financial fraud or an occupational fraud happens when there is a culmination of three things, that is opportunity, rationalization, and motivation. Motivation or pressure. So, pressure, opportunity, and rationalization. When all these three things come together, there is a probability of fraud. So, the simplest reason, if you ask me, as to why fraud happens is greed. People have that habit of getting everything but not working for that everything. And there are a lot of factors, but if you ask me one thing, greed is something which comes first in my mind.
Right. You also talk about this fraud triangle. Could you explain a bit more about this opportunity, motivation, and pressure that culminates into fraud?
So, the fraud triangle is the basic building block of any fraud examination, of any fraud investigation. So, it is said, it is this fraud triangle, as I told you, was a theory given by Dr. Donald Tracy. For his PhD thesis, Dr. Donald Tracy, he gave a theory called as fraud triangle, in which he interviewed convicted felons who did this economic crime, convicted offenders who did this economic crime. Now, he conducted a survey of them and he tried to understand as to what is the reason that they did fraud, how they did that fraud, and what was their thought process. Based on this survey, he came up with a theory called as fraud triangle. Now, this fraud triangle given by Dr. Donald Tracy comprises of pressure, opportunity, and motivation. Now, what do we mean by pressure? Pressure is something which a person faces, that is non-shareable financial need. These were the exact words used in his thesis. Non-shareable financial need. That, say, if I require money, I am working in an office, and this requirement of money I am not able to share with my bosses.
Right.
I am not able to share with others. That is pressure. It may be because of a vice of me. So I am gambling. I may need money, or somebody may be sick in my family. I may need money. That is the pressure. Next leg in the fraud triangle is the opportunity. Now, by way of opportunity, we mean that opportunity is the opportunity to commit the offense. So, say lack of internal control. There is no maker checker in accounting terminology.
Right.
If we talk, there's no proper oversight. There's no physical locks.
Mhm.
So these are called as opportunity. And the last factor is rationalization.
Right.
So what do we mean by rationalization? Rationalization is, because humans commit crime and man is a social being.
Right.
Humans are social being.
Mhm.
So what happens that as human being, we have to justify ourselves before committing the offense. I have to justify me. I have to justify myself so that I can, I can commit this offense. That justification is called as rationalization. It is like I deserve this money. Say
Right.
if I give the first example where I have somebody sick in my family,
Mhm.
I asked my boss that I need some money because I have somebody sick in my family,
Right.
and can you please lend me the money? And he says no,
Mhm.
I cannot. So then I rationalize myself that I'm working so hard, I actually need the money,
Right.
and he's not even giving me this small amount. What is this small for him?
Right.
So I deserve that. I'm working so hard. I'm just temporarily borrowing. I'll return it.
Mhm.
I'll inform him. These are the feelings that I have. This is called as rationalization.
Right.
So for a financial crime to happen, for an occupational fraud to happen, these three things are needed
Mhm.
so that the financial crime is completed. This is common in most of the economic offenses and financial crime cases: pressure, opportunity, and rationalization. These three things help to investigate the crime as well, because you investigate from the pressure angle, opportunity angle, and the thought process of the person. The rationalization helps in interviewing.
Right. So,
This is the fraud.
right. So we understand fraud and how does fraud happen. And in your experience, who are the people that do those frauds, right? In an organization, in a corporate environment, the people that instigate the fraud, where are they in terms of hierarchy of the corporate structure?
Sushil, there's no demography for fraud.
Right.
It's not that people of a particular gender or people of particular race. There's no demography when we talk about fraud. Fraud is pervasive, fraud is everywhere, and all types of people are equally susceptible and vulnerable to commit fraud. So, when we talk about hierarchy in the organization, there are different types of fraud which occur in an organization, and they are committed, they are perpetrated by different people in the hierarchy.
Mhm.
So if we talk about financial statement fraud, that is falsifying the balance sheet, which ruins the company, this type of fraud is generally committed by people who are higher up in the organization structure. So the top management is involved in this type of large frauds. But then if we talk about asset misappropriation, that is petty theft or stealing of inventory, expense reimbursement, such type of fraud, this is committed generally by people lower in the hierarchy.
Mhm.
So false expense reimbursement, false travel claim, stealing of inventory, these things are committed by people who are lower down in the hierarchy.
Right.
So this is how the fraud is, the fraud is covered by the higher ups. They commit large amount of fraud,
Mhm.
whereas the lower one, they commit small amount of fraud. And then you'll be surprised to know that as the qualification, there are surveys
Right.
that as the qualification increases, people with higher qualifications commit larger amount of frauds.
Right.
More qualified the person is, the bigger amount of fraud he or she commits.
Right. I also ask this question because the news that we look into, the financial frauds that we look into, the reportings are mainly about these type of frauds, balance sheet frauds, and one of the biggest scandals is that of Enron, where India was also affected, right? Where the higher ups were shifting their profits and recognizing assets that had no value by just conjuring up numbers and making a lifetime value and marking to market and those type of frauds. So basically, because those type of frauds are reported and we hear about those type of frauds, we tend to believe that higher ups are more into frauds, but also because maybe the frauds that they commit is of a larger amount and also affects a large number of people. So maybe that's been reported and also that's in our general headspace. So when we talk about fraud, now let's talk about the forensic accounting, right? A fraud happened. We talked about preventing fraud, but when a fraud has already happened. Now, what is the process a forensic accountant follows to, go and figure out what frauds happen and find that trail of leads or sources?
So, the investigations, the forensic accounting starts with recognizing the fact that a fraud has occurred.
Yeah.
So the company or the organization, it recognizes that a fraud has happened and something wrong is happening in the company. That is when they call the professional. That is when we receive our first call, and most of our appointments happen during that panic period. They really don't know what to do. In most of the cases, we also don't have a clear cut scope, because they're not very clear what has happened, how has happened. All these things are not clear. So they give a very, skeletal scope, very broad scope, as to you are supposed to find the fraud. So then we help them to narrow the scope. We try to understand what is happening, how it is happening. We understand the case, we understand the psychology, we understand the persona of the people working, we understand what is their reason for suspicion, and then we start the investigation step by step. We form a hypothesis and we go on discovering of evidences, we go on testing the hypothesis, and based on that we prepare a report and we give that report. If need be, we go for testification if required. In certain cases, they require us to testify, that is to give us a witness statement or to appear as an expert witness in court of law.
Right.
That is also required, so we do that. So it all begins with recognizing that fraud has happened, calling us, and then we have certain set procedures based on understanding the company, drawing process flow, knowing who is there, knowing all the employees, getting background information of the employees, so on and so forth, and then we do the investigation.
I also
How it goes.
understand that, like the standards where how an accounting should be done, and also how auditing should be done. So there are standards of accounting standards. There are the standards for auditing, and as I understand, there are also standards for forensic accounting. Why was those standards necessary, and what are in those standards? If you could give me a brief about that.
Yeah. So, Sushil, this is very interesting because not a lot of countries, not a lot of jurisdiction have standards. So when I say this, not a lot of jurisdiction have standards. Probably the American AICPA has a standard. The Canadian Institute, Canada CPA has a standard.
Right.
Then we have the Australian professional standards, which is the AICPA and Chartered Accountant Australia, two, three bodies. They have combined together, made a standard. So essentially we have the Canadian standards, Australian standards, and the American standards. We had these three standards, which were very, they were very brief.
Right.
Are specifically, they are one small standards which guide the professionals as to how to do forensic accounting. Now the problem in India, or the problem globally, it is a global problem. India has recognized that. As thought leaders, we have come forward. So the problem was that this forensic accounting domain was not regulated.
Right.
Like we have statutory audit under the Companies Act in India. The internal audit is pretty well defined. We have a lot of all types of audit which come out of some circular, some regulation, some guidelines, some act, some legal backing. Now in case of forensic accounting, the problem was that there's no act, there's no law. The only law which came into force was the appointment was made under the Indian Contract Act, and there were no standard practices, no standard procedure. Besides, India is a huge country.
Right.
So the people in North, they used to do certain things in their way. People in the West, they used to do their way. And all across the country, the practice were driven mostly by the way the experts were trained, by their skill set, rather than a standard way that this is how it should be done. This was not the case, that there was no SOP that this is how it should be done. So then the Institute of Chartered Accountants, and this led to a lot of heartburns as well. Say, if I say I'm a chartered accountant, I have been appointed by you. Say you are a company, you have seen some fraud in your organization, you have appointed me that, Durgesh, you are a forensic accountant, why don't you help us investigate this fraud and give us the report? After giving the report, there used to be a lot of misunderstanding between you and me. While I feel that I have done so many things and I have given the report with the limitations that your company didn't cooperate, you did not have the document, your people were, they were not very supportive. Despite all those facts, I have given you the report. You had a feeling that I'm paying so much money and I'm not doing my job.
Right.
I have given a report which is of not really value to you. I have not named the person. I have just got the modus operandi, and my report could have been more stronger. So there were these heartburns, where you think that I am not doing my work properly, and I think that I have done more than what I should for the price.
Right.
Because and in case of company, in case of private clients, when this happen, it's not a big deal. I
Right.
mean, say you are a private company, large corporation, I am a practitioner,
Mhm.
you don't like my work, next time you will not call me. But if I work for law enforcement, if you are a police department, then the problem was very serious,
Right.
because then you had questions on my integrity as to why I am not doing my work, why I am not doing it diligently, why I am not getting to this. So all these problems were there.
Mhm.
To address this problem, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, it came up with these 20 set of standards,
Right.
forensic accounting and investigation standards, as it is called, FAIS. And I had written my book, Forensic Foresight, based on that. I understand that is how you spot me as well. So I have written a book on the forensic accounting and investigation standards, and these standards are issued by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. It is a 200-page book which covers the entire life cycle of an engagement.
Right.
So unlike the Canadian or the Australian or the American standards, which are brief,
Mhm.
which are short, the Indian standard is very detailed.
Right.
It covers the entire life cycle, right from getting the engagement to performing the engagement to doing the engagement review, supervision, quality control, testifying, how to use an expert. Everything is covered in the standard and in a detailed fashion. So the institute published the standards, the literature of the standards. It was adopted by the council,
Mhm.
and it was made mandatory for chartered accountants from the year 1st of July 2023.
Right.
It became mandatory that whosoever is conducting a forensic investigation, he or she, if he or she is a chartered accountant, he has to follow those 20 standards. So they are minimum set of guidance,
Right.
note that people have to follow if they are doing a forensic accounting engagement. So it is like a service level agreement which sets the tone. You know what minimum I'll be doing. I know what is the minimum that I have to do.
Right.
So if someone asks me the question that is as to why did you go only this deep?
Right.
Why didn't you go more deep? I have that solution of telling you that institute prescribes this. I have to go only this deep.
Right.
So that is the importance of the standard, and the standards are proving to be a boon,
Right.
because it will stop a lot of litigation. It will bring a sense of semblance. But the standard is new,
Right.
the domain is new, people are still learning,
Mhm.
are still coming to terms with the standard. I'm sure with time
Right.
these standards will become ever more important.
Right.
And we are, as I said, we are the first body. The ICI is the first body to give such detailed full set of
Right.
standards.
Yeah. So you also talked about your own book, Forensic Foresight, right? Right.
Foresight.
Forensic Foresight, and it is a case-based, a sort of a practice manual, we can say, right, for chartered accountants or forensic accountants. I wanted to ask, why did you write this book? Why was there the need to write this book for the forensic accountants?
So, Sushil, as such, in my academic
Right.
journey of pursuing PhD, being a professor, teaching, tutoring, I did a lot. I published a lot of papers as well.
Right.
I had a craving to write a book. I wanted to write a book, and on my subject, I wanted to write a book. As such, if you will see,
Mhm.
particularly in our part of the world, in Indian subcontinent, in Southeast Asia, if you will see, we don't have this domain as developed as it is in the Western world. Even in the Western world, it is not completely explored.
Right.
It is still evolving. But in our countries like India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, these
Right.
countries which are relatively young, for us, we don't have authoritative documents, we
Right.
don't have book, we don't have literature on this subject.
Mhm.
So for young practitioners, and the standard is like a bare act.
Right.
So for young practitioners who want to do, for people who want to start a career in this field all across the world,
Yeah.
my book appeals to people all across the world, though it may be based on the Indian
Right.
standard. But the book is about conducting a forensic investigation in a modular, in a structured form.
Mhm.
So the reason why I chose to write a book on this subject is that I wanted to write a book. I have now, probably I have to see my Excel sheet,
Right.
but I'm sure it has reached done more than 200 investigations. So I want this experience of 200 investigations to be put forth in a book form which can help youngsters to learn, read, and go forward. So I that was my idea
Right.
that the book has to be there for the youngsters to read. And I wanted to write my cases in that book. So I have done that. I have written a lot of my cases in that book. The institute's literature was there, ICAI's standards were there, but then they were very abstract.
Right.
They were principle based standards. So I have tried to include examples, I have tried to include caselets, I have tried to include, in fact, I have around 70 caselets,
Right.
small caselets in my book. I have 20 case studies on each and every standard.
Mhm.
I have 20 case studies, and I have a particular 28-page master case study in my book,
Right.
which has a large case. I investigated a large case of multi-million dollar.
Right.
I investigated a case which has passed through all the standards. So entire life cycle as to how we got the assignment, how we started the assignment, what is the first evidence that we got, how did we write the report, how did we face the challenges,
Mhm.
how did we manage the hostile situation. Everything of that particular case is written as a chapter for youngsters to learn, for people to learn. In fact, even I am learning, it's a new field.
Right.
But that is one reason why I chose this, because we don't have a lot of literature particularly catering to our part of the world. We do have some literature
Right.
from the western world, but I hope you'll agree that our region are very different
Right.
from the western region. Our culture, our thought process,
Mhm.
our demography, the sheer volume, scale, policing, thought process, everything is very different. So our book has examples from our countries.
Mhm.
Our book has example of our thought process and our persona.
Right.
So that is the uniqueness in the book that I have
Right.
written, and that was the reason why I chose this book to write.
Mhm. And this is a milestone, as I can also see, because forensic accounting is a pretty much very new concept in South Asia, specifically. The standards are also quite new. 2023, just it has been made public for chartered accountants to be used. And so there was a need for resources that you have provided. Now, for anyone who want or has an engagement to do forensic accounting, they have the standards, they have the cases that they could refer to from a book and how to do it. But I wanted to ask, who can accept a financial, an engagement for forensic accounting? Is there any specific qualifications or requirements there?
So, so if I can't speak of all the jurisdictions, but then whatever I know,
Mhm.
see, forensic accounting is mostly skill based and it is not qualification based.
Right.
The qualification, so the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India conducts a certificate course called as FAFD.
Mhm.
ACFE conducts a course called as CFE, Certified Fraud Examiner. The university from where I did my PhD, it's a large university,
Right.
it's an excellent university. They conduct MBA in forensic accounting, postgraduate diploma in forensic accounting. We also have another university called as Rashtriya Raksha University. They conduct forensic accounting. There are certain universities in the West. A lot of universities now are getting masters in financial crime, economic crime. So I am associated with University of Portsmouth. They are doing some courses, post graduation in financial crime. I am associated with Naif Arab University, where I teach a subject. It's in Riyadh. They also do masters in economic crime. All these degrees and courses are okay, but these are not mandatory if you want to be appointed as a financial crime specialist or if you want to be appointed for investigation of financial crime. But the advantage of these qualification is that because you are investigating a case which will be litigated at one point of time in the court of law. So when this will be litigated in court of law and you will be called for testification, then your credential as an expert has to be built and it has to be shown. Otherwise, how will the judge believe or how will the jury believe that you are an expert and whatever you have done properly? Now, to fortify that credential, to establish that credential, it's important to have the qualification. Of course, learning is very important. Getting the assignment is also very important. But to do all these things, the qualifications help you stand out. So there's no minimum mandatory qualification that you have to pass this, you have to pass this, you have to pass this. But then the qualifications or the universities or the institutes that I listed, they give this specialized qualification. And once you have taken this specialized qualification, then it helps you stand out. In fact, I have small short courses. I have published 2 3 courses on Udemy,
Right.
and I'm in process of publishing a few more. There are some very affordable courses from $10, $15, $20 I've published on Udemy based on my knowledge. And those courses help you to understand the intricacies and nuances of the financial crime investigation landscape.
Right.
So while there's no mandate that this qualification is needed, it's very strongly recommended and advised that you have certain specialized qualification.
Right. So, someone just starting out or thinking about getting into the field of forensic accounting, is there a minimum that she should be a chartered accountant first, or an accountant have a background in accounting at least?
So it's always preferred to have a background in accounting. It's not even important to be a chartered accountant. But then, Sushil, say if you want to hire someone for investigation of an accounting fraud. So you have one chartered accountant and you have a graduate accountant who's doing, both are doing the forensic accounting. Whom will you pick? You will, of course, be picking a chartered accountant because you consider the qualification as superior and working more in this domain. So the qualification helps you to land the job. It's not mandatory, mind you. It's not. There's no act that under so and so act only chartered accountants can be appointed. No, there's no such act. But because of the chartered accountant qualification, it has so much importance and so much value that people prefer appointing chartered accountants. Otherwise, there's no such act.
So there's no actual qualification that you need, but you do need the skills. And what are the skills that you think would make a good, forensic accountant?
So it's a multidisciplinary area. So skills, if you ask me, the first skill that comes to my mind is analytical skills, perseverance. The thought process of finding, hunting, fishing, not leaving, that is the most important skill that is required. So analytical skills is most important. And then otherwise, if you ask, it's a lot of knowledge as well. So one should have a working knowledge of information technology, because data is to be extracted. While extracting that data, you have to ensure that you follow the protocols, you follow the Information Technology Act, you follow the Data Protection Act. Knowledge of information technology, knowledge of law is also very important, because you have to understand what is admissible, what is non-admissible, what is cognizable, what is non-cognizable, what is bailable, what is non-bailable.
Right.
So knowledge of law is important. Communication skills are very important. Psychology is very important, because you're dealing with humans, you're dealing with fraudsters, you're dealing with people who have done wrong things. So how will they react, how will they face, how will they talk, all these things. And then communication skills also are important, because you have to write a report.
Mhm.
So to write that report, you have to get into psychology, you have to know what is to be written and what is not to be written. So communication skill, psychology, law, all these things are important part which one has to remember and one has to learn if he wants to be a good forensic accountant.
Right. But they, in law or IT or other areas, because you said it is a multidisciplinary area, one cannot be expected to be expert in every field, right? So, do you require a working knowledge or an expert knowledge?
No. It's not an expert knowledge,
Mhm.
but it has to be a working knowledge.
Right.
And then, when you start, see, I'll tell you, the moment when I speak law, as a chartered accountant, I'm not expected to know the Indian Penal Code. There are limited sections of the Indian Penal Code that I need to learn. So if I tell you about law, I need to know, certain sections like 1TB, criminal conspiracy. I'm talking about the Indian Penal
Right.
Code, Indian sections of the Indian Penal Code. So probably criminal conspiracy. Then I need to know breach of trust. Then I need to know forgery. Then I need to know usage of forged document. Then I need to know a little bit about theft. Then I need to know forging of security bill.
Mhm.
Certain sections. So probably out of the 500 odd sections that we have, one needs to know only 20 sections.
Right.
So you don't need to know the complete act when you start. Similarly, for IT Act also, when I say, you don't need to sit yourself to extract the data. I have never done that.
Mhm.
But I have to know that, because ultimately I have to defend my report in court of law. I have to lead a team. I have to explain my team that please get this data. And then my team may come that, sir, this is not possible. We cannot get this.
Mhm.
So in that case, I have to rise up to the occasion. I have to research. And if I don't have that fundamental knowledge, how will I be researching? How will I be getting that knowledge? So I have to research and I have to teach my team that this is how you get this data. So a good working knowledge is required. That is why I emphasize a lot on academic learning, teaching, training, This is very important.
Right. And so there's also scope for external experts to be used, right? So you don't do everything yourself. You have a
Yes,
working
yes.
knowledge, and then you use your team who might have specialized knowledge in specific fields, and also you use some external experts.
Yeah. So one cannot be an expert of everything. In fact, our standards also advocate and they have a dedicated standard usage of work of an expert. So you have to have people on the job who know their subject. So we have investigated few cases. We have investigated cases where we have hired expert. I mean, we investigated a case which required radars and sonars. We investigated a dispute for a client which had radars, sonars, and very specialized technical equipment. Now, as an accountant, I only see invoice and I know that $1 million has been spent. How am I supposed to opine whether the machine is of $1 million, whether the building erected is of $1 million? I only see the invoice and I say that yes, $1 million has been spent. The invoice is there, the debit in the bank account is there, the credit to the receipt is there, confirmation from him or her is there. So money has been spent.
Right.
But then I have to use an expert to say that yes, it is used for the same equipment. The same equipment, its market value is around, say, $10 million or $1 million, whatever has been spent. So we have to use experts. We have to use experts, and we have to use these experts. There is also detailed methodology as to how to use the experts, who should be used, how they should be recruited, who maintains the record, who has the responsibility. Everything is discussed in our standards, and everything is discussed in the book as well.
So we are in the part where we now want to, slowly get to the end of this session. But before that, can you share with us a case where you were the investigator, where it was a highlight of your career, or for someone who is just starting out, would be something to learn from? Is there some case that you want to share?
Frankly, I work in some of the most controversial
Right.
cases in my area. So, if I discuss a case based on some research, you will get to know what case I'm discussing. Nevertheless,
Right.
let me discuss something which is in public forum. So, we had a case here in case of, or rather, let me discuss a non, no, no, let me discuss a non-controversial, simple case.
Okay.
So, we had a private client who had dispute in his insurance agency.
Mhm.
So there was a fire. He had a oil mill and he used to produce castor oil. Castor oil. So castor seeds. He used to crush those castor seeds. He used to produce castor oil, and this castor oil was used for industrial application. So we had that client. He came crying to us, very sad, because there a fire occurred in his premises,
Right.
and then there was a dispute in the insurance amount. So he had an insurance policy with one of the large insurance service providers here in India. He lodged a claim of around 30 crores. So that is around 300 million Indian rupees. He lodged that claim, but then the accepted claim was hardly 20% of what he had lodged.
Right.
So there was a forensic professional appointed by from the insurance company side,
Mhm.
and the forensic professional from the insurance company side has his way of calculation and doing.
Right.
And then the client came to us because the client had filed a writ petition in the high court that the insurance company is going back on its promise. We, as an expert, we gave our report. Now, first of all, this is not a life transforming case for me. It's a
Right.
non controversial case which
Right.
I can discuss.
Sure.
That is why
Sure.
I'm discussing this. So, so in this case, certain peculiarities, as I say, reading the report is very important. We read the report. Now, if I don't know how much you are aware about storage of oil, but then there are conical shape. They are called as silos. This way and straight, conical in this way. They are called as oil silos. Oil is stored in that.
Mhm.
And then when I was reading the surveyor's report, the surveyor who went for the salvage calculation of the salvage value, when I was reading the surveyor report, there was a sentence written that the salvage amount was sound method was used to detect the amount in the container. So I asked my client as to what is the sound method of detecting liquid in a bottle, what is the sound method of detecting liquid in the bottle? So, you know, if for an example, I can show you this. If this is half filled, I hope you can see the bottle. If this bottle is completely filled, knocking here will produce a different sound. Knocking here will produce a different sound.
Right.
Are you getting? Knocking here will produce a different sound. Knocking here, the empty bottle will produce a different sound. Will produce a different. So he said in the local language. I'm from Gujarat, so he spoke in Gujarati. The local language. He said that, sir, the surveyor, he got a stone from the site because everything was burned. So he took a stone, he knocked that stone, you know, like this, knocked that stone here, 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 and then he decided that so and so liter of oil is still there in the container. I said, how much was it, sir? He said, sir, it was completely empty. There was nothing. It is highly flammable.
Right.
I said, how this 2, 3, 4 crore odd rupees? He is telling that you already had, sir. He said, sir, I really don't know. That is why I have come to you. So then, you know, we started looking at the academic literature as to how oil is measured. So we came to the dipping method of measurement of oil. We came to the periscopic method of measurement of oil. And we learned method as to how oil is measured. We spoke to people as to how industry expert as to how oils are measured. Again, you know, if you talk about measuring liquid,
Right.
it has something called a specific specific density. Yeah, specific density. You know, being from commerce background, I'm poor with sciences. So if I speak wrong nomenclature, please excuse. So we had something like specific density or specific gravity. So when specific density we say, you increase the temperature,
Right.
the volume increases.
Right.
If you decrease the temperature, the volume decreases because it becomes more dense, more thick. You know, so based on those factors, the quantity also changes. Now it is important to know your product, get more and more and more information about the case, and then you have to demolish the report, which is probably, if I say not in your favor is not a correct word, but you have to demolish the report which is incorrect. So that is how we did that. And I'm sure the client will be, I'm told that he has got some intermittent success. He has won the case at lower court. I would not give all the credit to me. Of course, a lot of credit goes to the advocate who argued based on my report. But then I'm told that he has won that in some court, but then the matter has still not concluded.
Right.
I'm sure he'll come out, if not all 30 crores, negotiating and getting somewhere in between what the insurance company is offering and what he wants.
Right.
He'll be coming there.
Right. So
This is one case which I found interesting, and in a short period we can discuss.
right, and you know it's a very good case to end also because we are ending in a high note where we can see the result of a forensic accounting engagement where someone, your client, was getting very short end of the stick, right? He burned out a lot of his inventory, but it was only the insurance was only giving him just some amount, and now there's hope that he could recover a lot more than that. So that is one of the benefits of forensic accounting for clients, and also for those who are being wronged by financial frauds. That was not a case of financial fraud, but in other cases where frauds happen, the forensic accountants help finding the fraud and also help in providing uh, closer to the victims as well, right? So thank you very much for that case and also the whole discussion. And also before you go, if someone wants to reach out to you, where can they reach out to you? And also if you can talk about where they can find your book and Udemy course. We'll also give the links in the description, but if you could just give us where they could find those resources.
Yeah. So as you said, I will share the links with you. You can put it in your description about the Udemy course, about my book. I have a copy of my book. I always have a copy of my book
Sure.
on my table. So I have people who come and ask me, so I have to sign copies and I have to give. You know, for me, I am pretty much active on the internet. I have a LinkedIn profile,
Right.
and I respond to most of my messages on LinkedIn. I am pretty active on LinkedIn. I publish a lot on LinkedIn. So probably LinkedIn is the easiest medium how I can be contacted. You can write to me. You can write an email to me. So durgesh@dkms.co.in. And probably, you know, if you'll get my phone number
Right.
once you send me an email.
Right.
And once I find the contents relevant, I don't find appropriate to discuss my phone number on a public forum.
Sure.
And LinkedIn is something which I respond to. You can find me. I'll give the link for the book. In fact, I'll give you link for our. I'll request my publisher to give a special rate so that you can post that, and then you can get a good discount if you order the book through the publisher.
Thank you very much, and it's very good news for the viewers of this channel also. Thank you very much, Dr. Pandey, for your valuable time today, and we hope to see you again next time to discuss even more about forensic.
Thank you, Sushil. Thank you very much for inviting me over. Thank you very much for discussing such thought-provoking questions. We will. I'm sure you have a vibrant channel. I saw some of your podcast. You do very well. You discuss very well. Your studio is very good. I wish I could be there sometimes physically to discuss more. The personal interaction is far better than the virtual medium. But God willing, very soon we'll have something.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much.